Hello everyone, and welcome to the Miss Pink Digital Podcast, home to everything digital marketing, brand building, and tech. And on today's episode, we are going to be talking all about ad creative, and more so ad creative for a full funnel strategy. Now, those of you who don't know what I mean by full funnel, I'm basically talking about the different stages in the digital marketing, specifically paid advertising process for the user or the prospect. So within digital marketing, there's a funnel, and it's basically the journey the user goes down before they decide to purchase your product, sign up for your services, get in contact with you, whatever it is. And ideally, you want to cater your creative to each stage of the funnel. You don't want to be using the same creative throughout, because that's not going to be an effective strategy for you. Reason being is the mindset of the user changes depending on where they're at in their journey. So the funnel has actually gotten more complicated and more steps have been added to it since the more traditional funnel was talked about. And maybe I'll do a whole episode on my view of the funnel, but I'm going to be talking about a 3-step funnel. So awareness, consideration, and action. However, I do just want to say, I do think there are more than 3 steps for the user. I think now we're putting more consideration into our purchase decisions. We're putting more intent behind what we're looking for. And we're just being overall more careful and less spend happy. Not only due to factors like the cost of living and things like that, but also there's more competition. There's more places to look and learn and find someone who's going to give you more bang for your buck. So just because of that, naturally, users are more hesitant to convert as quickly as what they used to. So yeah, I think it might be worth doing a whole episode on the funnel and what I think the stages are. But today we're just going to be talking about a 3-step kind of funnel: awareness, consideration, and action. So the awareness phase, also known as top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. So the awareness phase is very top of funnel. That's when you're trying to reach out to new users and kind of prospect and get your brand in their brain initially. Consideration / middle of funnel, it's when they're starting to warm up to you. You know, they've been to your website, they know who you are, they've carried out kind of the softer metrics. Maybe they've signed up to a newsletter, maybe they've, followed you on socials or something like that. And then you've got the bottom of funnel, which is action, and that's where you've landed them. They've purchased, or they're about to purchase. You're trying to get them over the line of purchasing your product or service or whatever. And then there's also the retention piece as well, which is where they're already on your radar, they're already a customer, and you're trying to keep them converting and upsell them and all of that good stuff. So we're going to be talking about how we can cater our creative to each stage. I'm going to try and keep this not super long and somewhat palatable, but I'm also going to bring in other Google ads practices and Facebook ads practices, TikTok ads practices. I might even do a separate episodes for those and make this a whole creative series, because otherwise it's just a lot of information to take in. And I don't know about you, but I don't really learn when I'm trying to absorb too much. It's fun to absorb a lot of information, but sometimes it's a bit overwhelming. So we'll see how this one goes. So first of all, I'm going to touch on the awareness part of the funnel, and essentially you're trying to find new users. And this is essentially, to put into simple terms, this type of creative is where you need to appeal to the largest pool of users through your content. So it doesn't have to be too specific, too niche, because you're trying to appeal to as many people as possible within reason. They still have to be relevant to your targeting. They still have to be relevant. Let's say if you have a dog food brand, you don't want to target people who hate dogs and would never need dog food. That's not what I'm saying. You don't need to appeal to those. You still need to appeal to people who like dog food or want dog food for their dog. But the creative needs to just be more generally appealing and less niche. So something to think about is having a hero creative piece or hero content. And what I mean by hero content is this is your main piece of creative that you will always fall back on or lean on, and can kind of take the heavy blow of the advertising budget, or kind of take a lot of the advertising budget because of its performance, which will then allow you to creative test in the background. And then obviously during your creative testing, if you establish that there's a new type of creative that essentially beats your hero creative, it can then be replaced. But always look at that hero creative piece that can do the heavy lifting while you creative test other strategies. And in terms of establishing a hero creative, if you have historical data within your account, that's the first way to establish it. If you see there's something that performs historically very well, whether it's a certain type of video or whether it's feed-based creative or whether it's, certain types of ads like collection ads in Facebook or catalog ads, which is feed-based or anything like that, or a type of YouTube creative, look at the historical data, see what performs the best from a conversion rate perspective or a click-through rate perspective or whatever, and use that as your main piece. Something as well to note when it comes to the different stages of the funnel and creating creative that caters to these is establish what your benchmarks will be for what is performing well. And by that, I mean, what metrics are you assigning to each phase of the funnel to really measure how effective your ads are going to be? Because to be completely transparent, at the awareness phase, you might not necessarily, because it is so upper funnel, you might not necessarily get conversions off the back of it. Obviously, if you do get conversions straight away, amazing, great news, but you might not. So measuring effectiveness to awareness creative based on, the number of conversions you get, how much revenue it makes straight away, isn't necessarily going to be the most effective approach. So really think about those metrics that you want to use to measure success of your awareness creative. Some examples would be the click-through rate or the view-through rate, the engagement on the ad, the page views that were generated from the ad, or even if you want to go a bit more down the funnel, how many people then added a product to cart, signed up to a newsletter. You can kind of interchange these with the middle funnel phase, but really think about what you'd like to say is a measurable form of success for your creative, and then use that to establish what your hero content is going to be. Also at the awareness stage is when you want to use this stage to really test and establish your motivators of your content. Now, what I mean by this is establishing the true reasons why users would buy your product or want to buy your product and brand, or why they have. So it's essentially the same thing as personas, but except you're trying to replicate those personas into ad messaging. So for instance, let's say you run a photo printing business or a photo book business, and a motivator behind users buying your photo books is to capture memories. If that's a core motivator, then what you need to do is put that motivator within your messaging or within your creative, within your ad creative. So make the creative very focused around creating memories with your family. The good thing about the awareness phase is because it is all about testing and trying to lean into those more upper funnel metrics, it gives you the opportunity to test these different ways of messaging with motivators. And then once you've kind of established what the motivators are behind your product, you can then use these and play on these in the next few phases of the funnel. Goes without saying, obviously, because it is, top of funnel, you're trying to appeal to the largest number of users and you're really trying to drive that initial interest. Impactful creative is incredibly important. And the good thing about this funnel stage is you can use this to exhibit your more curated and polished content. So we hear a lot about UGC, EGC content, still important. Don't worry, we're going to get to that. But if you are a fan of the highly curated content pieces, if you're really struggling with buying into the UGC less polished content and you want, the really heavy branding, beautifully shot, beautifully edited content, the awareness phase is a perfect phase to do that, because it's going to be generally the more appealing creative across the board. And it also gives you the opportunity to be very brand and product forward. So create brand and product focused visuals at the heart of the content, incorporate storytelling through your visuals, and keep the primary focus on the product and its features and stuff like that. That's your opportunity to do this. And of course, if you want to, you can also implement and test the UGC pieces as well. Definitely still keep testing those just because they are super effective creative. But I have seen in a lot of instances, especially in the awareness phase, the hero content tends to be that more polished piece of content. And if it's with an e-com store, normally attached to like a product feed or something like that. So that's kind of the key pieces to take away from the awareness stage in a bite-size format. Obviously, there's more elements to it, but like I say, we're not going to be too overwhelming today. And then we're going to go into the consideration phase. So the consideration phase is for the next pool of users that generally they've seen your brand, they like it, and they've shown that initial interest. And now you want to keep them interested and kind of help move them along in their journey a little bit. And the good thing about the consideration phase is you've probably learned quite a lot in the awareness phase. So now you can tweak it. And one thing I saw this way of phrasing like how to cater the funnel, the creative tweak phase of the funnel. And I really like how it was phrased. Basically, each phase you get, the creative starts to become more and more focused to each phase. So more and more catered and specific to the user. Obviously, the awareness stage, it's got to appeal to a large pool of users, whereas a pool of users is now getting smaller and we need to cater our creative accordingly to that. So obviously, things like user-generated content is a great way to build trust and social proof and kind of trigger loss aversion in the consideration phase, because the thing you want to do with the consideration phase is this is your time to gain as much trust as possible and really make them feel like they really need your product. And the way you can do that is through showing other people with the product, because then they'll see that someone is enjoying the product. They'll see that someone's using the product in a very relatable format and think, I should probably have this too. And it's the same thing, loss aversion, same thing as FOMO. They don't want to miss out. So they might want to look into it more if they see other people enjoying and using the product. Another good one to test in the consideration phase is employee-generated content. And I feel like employee-generated content is has become the new user-generated content, whereby it gives brands more relatability and allows the user to kind of look into the brand's world a bit more and build trust with the brand because they see faces of the brand, they see employees in the brand. And naturally, if they see the more look they get into your brand, the more they're going to trust you. So even testing with employee-generated content is another thing you could do here. Obviously, as well, alongside the UGC stuff, consider using creators. Obviously, use creators in the awareness phase as well. That goes for all the stages of the funnel. But now really think about the type of creators you are using. Do not just use any creator because they're famous and they've got loads of followers or whatever. Users don't really care about that anymore. Of course, you can test it if you want to, but really what users are gravitating towards is thought leaders in that space and people they can trust within that space. So for instance, if you're a makeup brand, don't just use a creator who's really big, got a really big following, really expensive to use because they're big and they've got loads of followers. Use someone who is very well known and opinion is very trusted in the makeup world. And that's more important now than ever because we're trying to build as much trust as we can. And I feel like influencers are losing their influence because, one, they're just not relatable anymore. They make lots of money doing a job that only a small pool of users can actually end up doing. And they've historically, unfortunately, some influencers have ruined it for the rest of them, have built a bad reputation with just taking any brand deal without really looking into the product. And because of that, it's diminished users' trust and their influence essentially. So really think about the creators you are using, but yes, still leverage them in all of the phases of the funnel. Now is also more important than ever to convey the product benefit and really focus on these product benefits. Also think about those questions that the target audience might have or issues the target audience might have with the product or queries that might pop up to do with the product quality or anything like that. And use the ad to address these queries before they even need to ask them. Another way you can convey the benefits of a product and, address user queries or build that trust is through implementing ads with reviews, using case studies, anything like that to really show that your products are quality and they're not going to regret their purchase decision. Convey messaging or make messaging clear on the website or wherever you link to it about returns policies, payment methods, all of that important landing page experience pieces, which I have done a podcast on before, to just gain trust. It's all about gaining trust in this phase and all about proving to the user that you're a legitimate brand and they should be purchasing from you. They're not going to regret their decision because you're amazing. And also incorporate any offers within your creative if you have any, especially things around and sales that are ending soon. Don't use scarcity tactics to move the user on. I don't think that's ethical to scare them into purchasing, but any form of offers that you can implement to trigger autonomy bias is going to be very, very important in this phase as well. And if you reflect your return policy statements and they're legitimate and they're, completely fair, then there's no reason why a little offer or a little sale isn't going to make them want to look into you guys further. So yes, as you can gather, this phase is all about trust, gaining trust, and also iterating on what performed well in the awareness phase and amplifying that. So for instance, those motivators, if you found a motivator that you see is really effective in the awareness phase, how can you amplify this in the consideration phase? Also catering to your target audience a bit more, because we're going to be a bit more narrow in our targeting. So if we're targeting to users who viewed a specific page or viewed specific pages, how can we cater our advertising to that? Catering to users who carried out specific actions, whether it's your followers, so you're offering like a follower discount, how you can cater your creative to that. Things like that is going to be really effective in the consideration phase, because they just need to gain that little bit of trust before they move on with their purchase decision making. And then last but certainly not least, we have our action creative, which is the more bottom of funnel phase. As I said earlier on, I feel like I'm really trying to simplify the creative strategy here. Creative strategy isn't this simple as such. It's a lot of testing and a lot of trying new things and working out each phase of the funnel and who the users are in this phase. But this is kind of like a one size fits all strategy that you can then go and personalize to your journey. And like I say, there are more phases now in the user journey. Obviously, I can't personalize this strategy to everyone because everyone's journey is so unique. So just a bite-sized version of this, just as we move on to the final phase. And the action phase is they're pretty much almost ready to go and we need to get them over the line and do what we can. And this is going to be the most personalized phase. And something that does really well for this phase is things like dynamic remarketing for products. So dynamic remarketing is essentially where you show the user the product they viewed on your site in a remarketing format. So all they have to do is click on it, go straight to that product and purchase. And a popular one, especially on social channels, is things like add to cart dynamic remarketing. So you can essentially retarget users who added an item to their cart but didn't purchase. And then from there, obviously, you can offer them, free delivery when they spend over X, a coupon code to get 5%, 10% off. This is going to be really effective at this phase because they're already keen to purchase or go forward with their decision anyway. And, this offer, highlighting any offers or being really personalized with your creative is going to be what gets them over the line, especially if you then want to trigger some urgency, by saying this offer is available until X or whatever, or even like popular one to kind of trigger availability bias and make them think, oh my gosh, there's not many products left, is by saying, low in stock on certain items. I've seen a lot of clothing brands do that, especially through their advertising and dynamic remarketing, where you'll be on the page and it will say, only 10 left in stock and stuff like that. Something I would say from the ethical side of things, obviously nothing wrong with doing that, but always be telling the truth when you are doing that. Because I've seen a lot of brands, especially in the drop shipping space, they will say that a product's running low on stock or they've only got X amount of items left, or they'll say 100 sold in the past minute, which is an effective strategy, don't get me wrong, but they're not being honest about that. And there's nothing wrong with advertising that you've only got 10 items left in stock or you're running low on stock or you've sold X amount in the past hour, providing it's true. That's where it crosses the line between being effective and unethical. And I always think ethically thinking should be at the forefront of your advertising. But that being said, providing it's ethical, this is incredibly effective in the action bottom of funnel phase. So personalizing your assets to the user as much as possible through things like dynamic remarketing, regular remarketing, highlighting offers associated with the products or services they've shown interested in, triggering urgency through availability bias, driving more trust by saying how many products have been sold in X amount of time. Stuff like that is going to be really effective at this phase. And also continuing to leverage that UGC content and keep that going throughout all of the funnel. Obviously, you don't have to be as reliant on the UGC piece here as you do around the awareness or consideration phase, especially in the awareness phase where you're really testing and figuring out what formula works for you. But this can just be another piece to throw in just to further gain that trust and, tell them to get going, get purchasing. But yes, that is it from me for now, because I'm decided as we were filming this, I'm going to make this more into a series and do multiple episodes, deep diving into creative and different creative strategies. And this one was just the start of the process, the top level view of a very bite-sized creative strategy that, whilst yes, we're not going into super nitty-gritty details, it is one that a large amount of people can start applying to their creative today, and testing and kind of getting into the more detailed elements as they learn data and as they, as more trends come out and they kind of refine their strategy a bit and refine the user journey. So I hope this episode was helpful, and I look forward to speaking to you guys again soon. Thank you for listening.